Hi friends, Mindy here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm working on week 11 of the Full Deck Challenge, which is hosted by Shauna at Shinuki Art. The prompts for this week are black and white, texture paste and stencil, and a pop of color. And so I am using Project Life cards. I've mentioned this in my previous videos with this challenge because I'm trying to use them up instead of using altered playing cards. Just trying to use up some of my Project Life cards. So I pulled one out that had a black and white pattern, but it was only on the left side. So I added some texture paste, or excuse me, some collage medium over on the right side. And I'm now going to start doing a little bit of a collage in the background. So I started with some Tim Holtz paper there down the right side, added some scrapbooking paper down along the bottom. This piece I'm gluing down here now is actually from a mixed media paper pad. When you tear out the paper, I saved those because I like the little fluffy edges. And then adding a little bit more of that collage paper up at the top just because I really, really love it. And I'm trying to break up some of that black just a little bit. So I'm actually going to come in with another piece of scrapbooking paper and I am going to add that on there as well. I am adding tissue all the way across the top, just like I said, to kind of just push back some of that black. I'm also going to be adding some of the scrapbooking paper that has some florals on it because my carryover item from last week is floral. So there was a flower was my kind of focal image for last week. I'm going to use that as my inspiration and carryover item for this week. My constant item is a word. I've mentioned that before. I use the word that came from my Word Study Wednesday. And this I just find is a good way to sort of reinforce what I learned in that process of study. I also always write out the scripture on the back of these cards as well as another way to just kind of really, reinforce how I'm learning this. And let me know if you would prefer to see these two things happen like in the same video, if that's something that you would rather see instead of two separate videos. Just leave that in the comments and let me know. For some reason, my little collage medium wasn't holding everything down, so I did need to add a little bit of glue to get that collage tissue paper stuck down. And then I'm just going to trim off the edges. And we have now arrived at the stencil part. So I'm using a Tim Holtz stencil here. This is one of my favorite stencils. It's got the little like splattery look to it, just really grungy. Trying to be careful about how I place this stencil because I really don't want to cover up that paper that's on the left side that came from the paper pad. I am using the Crafters Workshop Light and Fluffy modeling paste for this. I find that it's just a nice weight for a project like this and it dries pretty quickly too. So just getting that stencil exactly where I want to. And I thought I was just going to do a couple little places of this stencil and I ended up covering most of it, but just because of the way that the stencil design worked. And then I'm going to pull in a craft tag here just so that I can use up the rest of that texture paste. And then very important, go wash my stencil and let this dry. So you want to make sure you're washing your stencil right away when you're using any kind of texture paste so that it will dry. Otherwise it will dry kind of in the holes. So now I need to add my pop of color, and I am using some Liquitex in Cerulean Blue hue. This is an acrylic ink. And I just kind of added it with a little dropper right in the middle. And this was really supposed to be a pop of color, and it ended up being quite a lot of color. So you can see I'm just coming in here and I'm spraying this down with some water, trying to get that ink to kind of move around and settle. I wanted it reacts differently to the texture paste than it does to the background. And so I like that sort of the difference between how all of that looks. So I'm just kind of spraying everything, letting everything run around and, settle and pool and do different things. I do fiddle with this for a little bit, sort of adding, spraying water, trying to get some of the color off so that you can still actually see the black and white, because again, this is an acrylic ink. So if you just put it on and let it dry, it will be opaque. So just kind of spraying it, adding some more, letting it run off, just trying to get the kind of look that I'm going for. And then I cleaned all that up and I felt like I needed some white in the background, especially where you can see those kind of differences between the papers. So I started out just kind of adding a little bit of gesso. This is actually a gesso wash. I keep an old gesso bottle and I just add water to that in there. So it's like watered down gesso that I'm using right here. I'm going over the top of some of the texture paste, and I'm also kind of dry brushing a little bit of it just on the high parts of the texture paste. And then I basically decided to kind of whitewash this entire thing, really with the intention of pushing back some of that blue. That was just too much of it for what I felt like the prompts were for this card, which is okay. It ended up being fine. And so I actually go through and kind of dry brush. I put some extra paint, some extra gesso up in that top left-hand corner because there's like a good solid section of texture paste there. Kind of go through, fiddle with it, and then I'm going to go through, add some more. I just kind of go back and forth until I really get this how I want. And I also at one point added just a little bit of water and kind of press my paper towel down into it, and that's what I'm doing right here. It just kind of helped everything, so it didn't look like I had just added gesso over the top of everything. I don't know if that makes sense. And then I came in with my Stabilo pencil here around the edge. I'm going to find my water brush, and I'm just going to activate that ink kind of around the edge of this card just to give it a little bit of a border. I was running into just a little bit of difficulty here because my texture paste was not completely dry. And so as I was trying to run that pencil along there, it kept wanting to pull up the texture paste. So we just kind of had to work with it here, but I just added a little bit, not a ton. I didn't want it to be super, super dark anyway. You can kind of see going back in there just because that was one of the sections where I was struggling with that texture paste there. So note to self, let everything dry. Don't be impatient like I was. So in my stash, I have had these acetate florals for, I don't even know, forever. And so I thought these would be fun because, again, I'm using florals as my carryover item from last week. And I just picked out a couple that I thought would be fun. I want the ones that kind of have a more solid outline. Originally, I thought, well, I'll just, put these on the background, but you can see when they're as they are, they just get lost back there because that background is really quite busy. So I need to try to fix that. And at this point, I wasn't sure that this was actually going to work, this idea in my head. But this is one of the things that I love about these kind of processes and these kind of like little no pressure cards is that you can just try things and see what happens. And so what I decided to do is pull out my gesso. This is actually my golden gesso, not my watered down version, not my gesso wash. This is just a straight gesso. And I'm just adding a little layer to the backside of this acetate piece. I just added a really thin layer. You can actually still see the brush strokes through it, which is something that I particularly like. If you wanted it solid, you could certainly do that. But I added a thin layer, let it dry because, I wasn't sure how it would dry on the acetate. And then I added a second layer kind of going in the opposite direction just to get a little bit better coverage on the back. And I did that with a couple of different pieces here. And so this is that part of that process of the mixed media and collage and things that I just really enjoy, which is sort of just, you have an idea and you just want to see if it works out, but also just getting lost in the process of all of this. So I'm just like, the next thing that came to mind, I saw the extra paper over to the side of my desk, and I thought that would actually look really, really good and help kind of break up some of this blue some more. So I'm going to add that down there at the bottom. I went ahead and glued down one of those little floral acetate pieces up in the top left-hand corner. I'm going to glue this down, and then I'm going to fiddle with this a little bit just to see how I want my floral and also my word. The word is the constant item. And I always do that on my Dymo label maker, which actually works really well this time because it's black and white. So, and then as I was sitting here, I had some washi on my desk actually from Word Study Wednesday. And so that I used in that video, and I thought, well, that would be fun to bring that into here as well. So added a couple of pieces of that. But like this whole process is just kind of taking the time, taking a few minutes. It's a low pressure, thing. If I hate it, that's okay. I can always start over if I needed to or whatever. So it's just a good way to kind of, answer some of those questions like, well, what would this happen if I, if I tried this, what would happen? How can I fix this? And I think you just learn a lot that way, even if you don't necessarily like the results 100% at the end. You've learned something along the way, which is still just as valuable. So I am going ahead and adding my word here down the length of my card. I do realize at this a little bit later that I got it on there crooked, and that's just going to have to be okay. I tried to lift it up, but there was just no way to do that because it was really adhering to that texture paste that was not quite fully dry at this point. So I kind of just stapled that one section of that flower down at the bottom just to leave it. And also there's just so much texture on this card, so it would really be hard to glue down that acetate piece. So I just stapled it at the bottom, and then I just felt like there needed to be something else kind of over on that right-hand side. So I have this little butterfly sticker. This is actually from By the Well for God. And so it's just a little tiny butterfly. I did trim it down, like there was a white border around it. I just trimmed off a little bit of that white border, and I'm going to stick it down in that bottom right-hand corner. And that just helped my eye. I felt like there needed to be just a little bit of something kind of in that corner. And that's going to be it for me. Super simple card this week, but it was just a lot of fun to get messy and play with paint. So if you like this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And until next time, bye.